Hi, everybody, and welcome back. This episode isn't about checking boxes or celebrating firsts. It's about power and who has it, who's denied it, and how women across the world are fighting to take it back. Today, I'm joined with.
Hawla or Kaula, Benghezi.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Politics at York University, and my research looks at environmental governance and how women are impacted by large-scale renewable energy projects at the local level.
And she was my amazing TA in my second year.
Gender and
Okay,
politics, right?
yes, yes. So let's jump right into it. Why do political institutions and these places that are supposed to represent everyone feel so hostile towards women's power?
Yeah, and I think this is a good question and it's a big question because, like, it's also looking at like the question of power um, in terms of like representation, but also outside of like the institution itself. So maybe like let's look at institutionally.
Yeah.
We don't see many women take up higher positions of power. And even within like the global north, where like it's seen as like women are equal to men, and we have, broken the glass ceiling and patriarchy has been dismantled. I'm saying all this, sarcastically, if
Yeah.
you haven't noticed the tone of my voice. Canada has never had a female prime minister. Neither has the U.S. Actually, Canada did have, I think Kim Campbell took over from Mulroney when he stepped down, but she was never elected, and she was only in the PM chair for 5 months. So overall, women's power is all continuously delegitimized institutionally. And that has a lot to do with this like public and private divide of like where women quote unquote should be and where men quote unquote should be, and the gender roles embedded in that divide. And so we still subconsciously, but also very much consciously, don't see women as being capable of leading a nation and a state. And that has a lot to do with like the masculinity and who is capable of leading a nation. And a lot of the times we see male figures and
Yeah.
this idea of a man being strong and capable and level-headed and rational, and women as being more emotional, etc. And so that goes to that, again, public and private divide where the social parts of life are compatible with women. And so even if you look at like who's the minister of what, a lot of the times those social um, ministerial roles are
Yeah.
given to women, whereas the economic and political roles, like more heavy political roles, are given to men. And there's been shifts, right? Like right now, Anita Anand is our like foreign minister, and that's very much a male-dominated role. But still, it's predominantly looking at it like more wide scale. It's still that way.
Yeah, and
And
I think yeah, like adding on to kind of what you were saying about like the different spheres, I think that like translates into how these systems were built. I feel they were never designed with women in mind. They were built for men, especially like white wealthy men. So when women like then enter those like spaces, it's like disrupting the things, like the way things have always worked.
exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. And it's interesting also because like when looking at like the building of the institutions, we have to look at like the building of the nation, right? The
Yeah.
building of the nation itself and the state is very much like from an IR, international relations perspective, a masculinist project. And it's not just like this past project, but it's continuously being reproduced, and so we see it even like in like defense spending and like protecting the nation and the very like within IR theory we look at things from uh, or how right now within IR there's this liberal or realist framework, which are very much masculinist frameworks that international realm has been built on, which is that, there's anarchy, individualism, each nation for themselves. Strength is what protects you. And so then that's being translated right now in this moment into more defense spending, more protectionism, and more of this like masculinist aura around nation building and statehood. Um, and so, yeah, like women are excluded from that. If I think like if Carney, there was a very, very like capable woman in Carney's position, I really don't think that she would have won in
Yeah.
that moment. Polyev would have probably won because really it comes down to her gender and her capacity to uh, go up against Trump. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think especially in this election, we would have definitely seen that.
yeah. Outside of the institution, I'm trying to think. Do you want to like tell me more about the or like what you were thinking about this question and your thoughts, and then I can.
No, I feel like I would have definitely approached the question the same way and talking more like institution based. So I feel like you answered it very adequately. Do you want to let's talk about women who refuse to play by these rules? Like what happens when women stop trying to like fit into these systems and like hope that one day they get into like this defense position, and when they start challenging these rules.
Ah, okay. Hmm. So, I think like this like the politics of refusal is really important, and it's interesting, and this is something that I think we talked about even in gender and politics about like
Yeah.
this tension about women should be taking up these spaces, but when they do, what change do they really make within this super embedded patriarchal system? Are they
Yeah.
just getting in line and doing what is told, you know? And or are they really making something like shifting something? And so that's been a topic of discussion in the study of gender in politics. But I think like really the politics of refusal, if you're going to talk to me about in a personal level, it comes down to choice, right? And it depends on whether like how do women speak back to the system is by choosing their own path, right? So whether it's like now the path is women should also work, right? In order to maintain neoliberal capitalist accumulation, women also are in the workforce. If a woman wants to choose to stay home, that is a choice that is also a refusal,
Yeah.
right? But that, like, at the same time, the woman who goes and works is choosing to do that.
Hmm.
However, our system is not made for the woman that gets to go to work to come back and not also have to do all the labor of the domestic sphere, right?
Yeah.
We still have that division. Same goes for the woman who chooses to stay home. She's not protected by
Yeah.
laws within her own home. And so there's all these like there's layers of that, you know, and it's complicated because we're still within the system. Even if you look at like let's say Anita Anand and her role as like the foreign minister right now, what is she doing differently than well before her was also a female, but her predecessors? What has she done differently? What have they done differently as women? What has, or alternately, if we look at Margaret Thatcher
Yeah.
in Britain and the rise of neoliberalism, I mean, she was key in that. Or Condoleezza Rice with the wars in Iran and Iraq.
Hmm.
She was, Secretary of State, and she was, and then or Hillary Clinton with, Libya, Syria, etc. So to have women in power, we have to ask what power and why are these women in these positions? To do what? Just being a woman
Yeah.
in that position is not significant at all. And it's not, for me, an act of refusal in any shape, way or form. For them, it might be because their gender is taking up that
Yeah.
space, but their gender is also conforming to the same system and, the same indoctrination as their male predecessors. If you look at it from a feminist lens, feminism operates in a very different way, or at least my feminism does, in that the refusal is a refusal of the system, of the patriarchal system. And personally, I think that happens outside of these systems itself.
Yeah, no,
And
I love that you said that because I've always said that too about like any man being like, well, you got some female leadership. I'm like, no, that's what they are on the outside, that they are heavily conforming, like you said. And it's
yeah,
just not like, I feel like even then, us women, we vote for women and we love to see that because we think it's going to make any change. And I feel like time and time again, we're just disappointed that it just does not happen.
I know. Yeah. And I like remember like just being like, "Oh my God, there's a woman that's doing this. It's so cool. It's so cool." And then I'm like, "Do better. Do better, women."
Yeah. Yeah, I think because it is like yeah, like again, you can look at it as like, oh, it's like an active refusal, like they're women taking up these like male dominated spaces. But it's not actually because they're just like getting their foot in the door and then just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like that's why I don't feel like I'll ever truly be represented by a woman of color in these high spaces because she's not going to operate as a woman nor a woman of color. She's going to operate as a white man to fit into the
Yes.
system she's working in.
Exactly.
And
That's
I think
very
like
good.
even yeah, like even going back to what you were saying about how like women like just making a choice, like whether you want to stay home, whether you want to go to work, and then like you're somehow drawn into both. And I think like any woman that makes like a very drastic stance on her life or whatever it may be. I think that's when we really see the patriarchy and the stereotypes like that are embedded in our head come out like, "Oh my God, you're so radical. This is so
Yeah.
dangerous. This is
100%.
chaotic. It's not going to work." And even I think like people view feminism in a sense too. Like there have been so many times where I've heard my friend or whatever say, "Oh, they want to stay at home and raise their kids and they don't want to work." And everyone's like, you're setting the sisterhood back 70
Yeah.
years, and it's like no, like she's making a choice, and that's what I believe feminism calls for.
Yeah, 100%. And like there's always I feel like women can never do it right.
Hmm.
If you work and you have kids, it's like you always feel like you're doing a disservice to your children, but then also you're getting judgment from society itself. Like I get this a lot. Or if you're at home, a lot like a couple of my friends, they're stay-at-home moms, and they don't, it's a choice that they made. They got university degrees, etc. They worked. But when they had their kids, they made that like very, and they were privileged to make that choice. That's also an
Yeah.
underlying, right? Because not everyone can make that choice.
Hmm.
And but they also get a lot of that judgment of like, you're just gonna waste your life. You're not gonna do anything with your degree. You're just
Hmm.
gonna, and there's like this, there's so much women can never get it right kind of a
Yeah.
thing. But I also like think that in order for women to refuse, they have to not only make that choice, but make that choice for other women too. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Like, it's not like what you think it is, but it's more like we are indoctrinated to think like a refusal is an individualistic thing. And that's liberal feminism telling us that. Like, I deserve to be equal to a man in terms of pay. I deserve to also, be represented in government and represent my constituents in government. But
Hmm.
it goes beyond that, and it's more of like we have to, as feminists, we must embody a collective thought, not an individualistic thought. And that means that we always look to the most marginalized women and what their needs are. And that's who we advocate for and are in allyship with. And not just women, also like other marginalized communities.
Yeah.
And so that for me is an act of refusal. It's not just about you, but looking beyond yourself. And
Hmm.
that's what my feminism speaks to.
But I think that idea like amazing and very well put. I think it's missing from like mainstream feminism in a sense. I think that it is, and I think it also goes like my connection that I made in my head is even like Western feminism. Like that's where we see it the most, that's what's most prevalent. And I think Western society does have an individualistic mindset. I think it's very, very different from like countries I've been to, even like Egypt where I'm from. When I go there, it's very much so community oriented and you feel it just walking down the street. Now, like go ask somebody for directions in Toronto and get hit with the
Yeah.
nastiest look. Like it's not a community. But on the topic of feminism, it's so mainstream in recent years. We see celebrities calling themselves feminists, corporations slapping it on t-shirts and coffee mugs. But how has feminism itself been polarized and who's been left out?
Hmm. Interesting. I love this question. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Um, okay, so I think like this is something that we also like, I don't know if I discussed it in your class or like in my other gender class, but we talk a lot about how liberal feminism is kind of pedestaled and depoliticized, right? So it's seen as this like, okay, women, we've given you the right to vote, we've given you the right to choose to how to dress only to limitations, right? It's like who gets to dress what? Like not everyone. Muslim women, you can't dress that way. But like, if you want to take off your shirt, great. We gave you that right. We give you the right to also get educated, etc., etc. So these are kind of the scopes of like liberal feminism being accomplished within the global north. And now we are feminist societies. Ta-da! But what that does is that it takes away this intersectional lens of feminism. And what is feminism beyond just a white woman being able to dress the way she wants to, voting, being representative, speaking her mind, etc. Is that it only represents a certain amount of people and their interests and excludes the majority and the masses, both in the global north and the global south. Like, let's get real now. The global north has become very much a multicultural space, and so in Toronto alone, you have like way more colored or racialized folks than you have, white people, or like seemingly, at least. But it's not represented that way in our institutions and also in the way that we act towards the global south, right? And we as in the global north, because I am here situated here. So liberal feminism is depoliticized but also weaponized against those who are outside of that feminism. And it's
Yeah.
weaponized by both feminists, Western feminists, but also our institutions in our states, our liberal institutions in our states. So we see this like with, especially in times of crisis and war. And I know like you're going to ask me one of those questions, so this is kind of like a two in one, right? Like we see this like
Yeah.
with the Iraq war, how it was weaponized. Feminism was weaponized. No, sorry, not Iraq war. The Afghanistan war. Feminism was weaponized by Laura Bush, who stood by her man and was like, "Yeah, we need to liberate those brown women from the brown men." And the media was very much part of that as well, that narrative. And most recently, I don't know if you saw this, but The View and like other media institutions were speaking about Irani women as needing to be liberated and justifying Trump's unconstitutional
What?
bombing of Iran. And being like, but do you see how these women live? They can't just take off their hijabs in the streets. And it's like, yeah, so they deserve to die?
Yeah.
You're gonna liberate them by killing them? Like that's how liberal feminism operates in at the global level in a very violent way. Um, in a very systematic way of like this is how it should be and this is
Yeah.
how all women should be and this is what feminism is, rather than looking at feminism as a cultural phenomenon and situated
Yeah.
in people's cultures and upbringings, etc.
And I think like people like we were kind of talking about earlier, like there's just such a divide. I feel like multiple divides in this concept of like feminism that like we're not collective, we're not together, and I think that's a very big problem of feminism. Like even in one of my classes, we had a like a week, it was a seminar class about women and gender. And there were so many girls in my class on about white feminism, on about, wow, I can't go to the club without being hit on. And I'm like, wow. I said, there are women dying across the world. What's going on? Why are we talking about this? And it's so crazy. And I feel like that's just where everyone's mind goes when you say feminism even now. I feel like white feminism has just like watered down this like
Yeah,
concept to be like, oh, you get catcalled? Yeah, I'm with you. We shouldn't catcall women. But it's like, hey, let's talk about why we shouldn't kill women in other parts of the world.
100%, 100%. And it's like
Yeah.
it's interesting because when we look at it from like a liberation perspective, it's like you can only be liberated so much,
Mhm.
even within the scope of like white feminism, right? Like
Yeah.
Roe versus Wade was overturned, right? But like that goes beyond even white feminism. It affects everybody, right? It's a domino effect,
Yeah.
but even they have been impacted. So unless we are all liberated and we're all in this together kind of thing, and I know that sounds kumbaya, but really that's the only
Yeah.
way like liberation from these like embedded systems of oppression can happen is if we always look at the most marginalized and work from there is like how I
Hmm.
see it. And yeah, you were
I
totally right.
agree.
Like, even teaching a lot of my like students in the very beginning, my gender students, it comes off like that, and then slowly we start to get more and more critical, and when we like put on those intersectional glasses.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But I think it also goes to like that, like at the start, exactly what you were saying, and as like the class develops, because I feel like we're not talking about this enough. We're not like being taught these skills or taught these like bigger like concepts embedded in feminism and kind of just like, let's respect women and be nice. And it's like, great, but what is going on everywhere else? Which is something I like, I've always kind of known, obviously, as a woman of color, but grown a lot in your class about thinking about things very critically. So, going back to war, something that we see time and time again, war, displacement, political crackdowns, women are often targeted first. Why is that?
Oh, well, this is a very hard question to answer because it's also very like it's hard from the lens that you look at it, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to look at it from like I said, like the liberatory framework of like we need to liberate women from the oppressive man, that's one way. But also when you look at it from uh, the sense of conquest, which we still have, by the way, like this idea of like land and women were seen as a way of domination and a
Hmm.
masculine domination. So they are targeted in war and like are targeted in very vile ways, not just through murder, but through rape and other sexual violence, forms of sexual violence, should I say. Uh, and that's a way of like imposing yourself and your authority over the other
Hmm.
entity, right? We see this not just with women, by the way, with men too. So men are demasculinized through these acts of sexual violence in times of war, when they're captured or when they're enslaved, etc. And it's a form of domination. It goes back to patriarchy, it goes back to masculinism, and it goes to our idea of the state and what the entity that protects the state, aka the military industrial complex, and how masculine that in itself is. So if you look at like even civil wars in Congo, etc., which I kind of I was a research assistant position for a SHIRK grant looking at survivors of sexual violence in times of war,
Hmm.
and a lot of these women were, taken from their homes, raped repeatedly, constantly, impregnated, and that was a form of domination. and these women couldn't go back to their villages, and they were shunned away from their own, like, people, because they were seen as like, you have a kid from the enemy, or um, you have been dirtied by the other person, and that's intentional, and that's a way of like, you know causing friction within communities, but also like depopulating, but also dominating. Like it's like all these layered masculinist ideas of domination. We see this
Yeah.
also with like Iraq, with the Abu Ghraib prison massacre, where men were sexually violated as a form of domination by the U.S. Army. And this has been, but it
Mhm.
continuously has happened throughout history.
Yeah. No, but even like what you were saying about like the conquests and having that like translated into like modern day wars, it's so insane because when you were talking about like land and women, like my mind went right to like the future. Like that's what you need. You need land and you need women to prolong your like civilization, if you will. And I think like taking that away from them is just such a, it sounds horrible, but power move in a very bad way, but power move to
Yeah.
like assert this domination. And I think even like with all the sexual violence towards all these groups that are being attacked, I feel like even the connection I make in my head is going back to like slavery and just the like serious long-term effects it has. And we could still like, we were talking very critically about like black men in society today, thinking about that, and it's like insane how long it stays with a person and carries on generally wait, why can't I talk?
Generation.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's just, it's absolutely like horrific. And it's like women, we have like women resisting and trying to fight back, and it's like they're victims and just like survivors and political like weapons, like just trying to survive on the other end of the world, which is just so insane to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that you said that, like
yeah,
women in nature, these because they are sites of reproduction, right?
yeah,
And that's like how we survive and we live. It's like through these sites of reproduction that are harbored in like the women and in nature. Yeah, continuously being violence is continuously being enacted upon these two sites. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
No,
and yeah, the
that's so
slavery.
crazy.
Yeah, and the
That's
slavery
yeah, that's
example
so
is perfect.
insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really like women, you are a walking uterus and nothing more, which is wow.
I know.
But okay, so to end on this, what does it look like to fight without asking for permission?
Mm. Oh, this is such a good question. I love it. But I think it goes back to that like first question about like, oh no, not the first, second question, sorry, but like about the refusal to be like against systems. And
Mhm.
and the fight can't happen alone, right? Because then we'll be worn out and we'll be tired or we'll be exhausted. But the fight has to come from the collective. And so it's really a collective refusal of oppression and systems of oppression that have like continuously pushed us down and oppressed us as women, as like, people of different sexualities, races, religions, caste systems, etc., 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 classes. Um, and so, yeah, the system is made to be individualistic
Yeah.
because it doesn't want us to have that collective mindset. And when it keeps us apart, it can continue to do what it's doing. So, yeah, this like idea of like a collective refusal, I think, is my
Yeah,
answer.
we need to plan something. We need to call women of the world, sit in a circle, sing kumbaya, and take our power back.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it
well,
happens in different ways, right? Like there's different acts of refusal.
yeah.
Um, like I'm very interested in like knowledge production, alternative knowledge production through like, traditional farming practices. That is an act of refusal in
Hmm.
itself because you're saying no to these large scale development projects. and you are continuing what your ancestors have taught you that are very ecologically sustainable methods. But other like any way that says no to the system and that other women also, can
Hmm.
get behind. And it's very diverse, right? It's situated in you and your upbringing and your lived experience and your circumstances. So it's not going to be a collective that's unilateral and universal because we would just be reproducing the same oppressive systems, right? There would be a
Yeah.
hierarchy, but it would be a collective that understands that we are different and we have different goals, but the main goal we have is an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist mindset. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my
That's all I
answer.
have for you.
What about you?
Anyways. Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that there is like going back to what you were saying about how they're like we're just so individual, and I think that that's done on purpose. I think like they don't want us to become collective. Like even looking about how like great and powerful Western nations are, like, they got like that by working together, by
Mhm.
having like things like NATO and having the EU summit where they all go and chit chat and like all of these things where they're working together and they're always aligned. And I think that is one of the many things, apart from being like white men, make them so powerful. And also like they're going into our countries and messing it up. But I think if but I think like even just waking up and kind of saying like, no, what, I don't want to conform to this like Western idea. Like I even saw this thing, I don't even know if it's true, so take what I'm saying with like a fat grain of salt. But they were saying that they were building a casino in the UAE. And I was like, what's going on? Like you guys are Muslim countries. Like what do you mean? Like why can I go to Dubai and order like 17 shots of vodka, go play at a casino like it's Las Vegas? And it's like, where are your morals? Like what happened to everything you were standing for such a long time? And it's literally like money and conformity, and it's a very big problem.
Yeah, it is like capitalism is what drives this world, and it's what, it's money, 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 and whatever it takes to get there. Doesn't care, like capitalism doesn't care about your morality.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, anti-imperialism is always interlinked with anti-capitalism, because it's what drives imperialism or colonialism was the capitalist like fetishism of like land and resources abroad.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, like it's but I did not know about this about the UAE, but I'm not surprised with how, they have
Hmm.
been acting. And you're right, like Western powers want to continue to maintain their Western superiority. And they can't do
Hmm.
that as an individual nations. They have to do that together. And with Trump, it's like, oh no, because he's like erratic. So they're like scared for their lives about how
Yeah.
that would work. And that's why I conform to like the, 5% increase in NATO spending, etc. Um, but yeah, like it's harder for us to do that because we're so divided and intertwined in the hustle of capitalism, right? The everyday
Yeah.
hustle. So
Yeah.
people
I
don't.
see that. Yeah, I see that a lot. Like even with Palestine, like I often feel so frustrated with like Middle Eastern Arab countries. I'm like, don't call yourselves Muslim if you're acting like this. And it makes me so mad. And it's like, why? Like, let's wake up. Let's work together. And it's like even I say this all the time. We would have been the richest countries, the Middle East, Africa. We have so many resources, so much wealth, and it's
Oh
like
yeah.
we got destroyed by Western powers for a reason.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's time for us to wake up and be like, no, actually, we have power. Let's just work together and we can take over. But no one wants to do that. People are
No,
too
there is
scared.
there is an individualistic division, right?
Hmm.
That happened, and the West did that. They
Yeah.
definitely, because there was this pan-Arab rise after the anti-colonial movement in the 1950s. Pan-Arabism rose, and after the war between Israel and the Arab states, that became the point of friction. And that's when
Yeah.
the West was like, no, 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 nip this in the butt. We need to divide them all up and we need to make sure that they do not align with each other. And they do that in very different ways, and that's like a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
It's like Middle East politics. Yeah.
Yeah, we should do another one about Middle Eastern podcast
Invite
politics.
me anytime. This is so much fun. I loved it.
Thank you. Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, but I'm so proud of you, and I'm proud of
Thank
like the way
you.
that you set this up and your critical mind. You're always
Thank
like
you.
awesome in class and so like attentive, and you always contributed, and I loved having you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everybody for watching. We will see you next time. Until then, stay curious, stay critical, and stay politically engaged. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having me.